Hi, Dorota.
Hello.
Hi. I hope.
Can we verify whether I can share the screen? Can't hear you. Hope I cannot hear you at all.
Can you hear me, Isa?
Yes,
Okay,
I can. Can we try whether we can share the screen? So that would be helpful. Can I try it?
Yes, I think it's a good idea.
So how it goes now? What you see, because I don't know what you see. It's important what you see, not what I see.
We see selected instruments, but it's not full screen.
So my question is how to do it full screen. Is anybody... Oh yeah, I see that. What now?
Robercie, puściłbyś mi tło, proszę, bo coś nie mogę go znaleźć. Mailem na przykład.
I'm trying, but it's...
Okay, now I see your cursor.
Yeah. But I just don't know whether you see this full screen or not.
No, it's still not full screen. It is, we say, wszystkie narzędzia edytuj.
Yeah.
Maybe the icon on the bottom right, the third from the bottom, is a page. It could be the...
That one?
Yeah. Mm-hmm. Nothing happened, or is there a menu that opens? No, it's, but I mean, I think it's okay. I mean, the toolbar that we can see is really tiny, so it will work.
I see actually the full screen on my computer. Right? You don't. So
no, in our case is the entire window of the well, I don't know the program, but you know, the
whatever it is. Yeah. I can try and change it for a
Hello, colleagues. I think you should stop your screen, sharing your screen, and then try again, because Teams it does not recognize two functions at the same time. Yeah, now try again when.
But now it would be better if Robert tries, because we present together and he's in a different location, right? Yeah, it's funny. With you, it works, right?
Because I have Windows and you have
Apple, yeah, okay. It could be the case.
But in Windows, you know, it works. There is a drop-down menu, and you just select full screen. So it should be somewhere there. Maybe the top right corner also, where the menu opens.
Yeah, I can try. If you give me a second, then I will try again. Whoop. It's all going very slowly. Yep. And what about now? How is it going now?
No, still not. And do you have
no, I even don't. I just lost totally the view of the file, so I just don't know how it works.
I
do you
think
have
someone
two
from us
screens?
can
And
share.
now, no. Okay, fine. So
Isabella, maybe we can share your screen, and you will be just saying next and next, or Robert can share your screen.
No, that's very disturbing. No, I refuse. This is very disturbing. It's really disturbing. So I will try another way, and then we will accept as it is, right? Give me a second. I will try it. And what with the first speaker, because we are second anyway.
Colleagues, I also have a question about how do you want me to be part of the conversation? Somehow I'm going to create this discussion at the end. So are we going to have some place for questions and answers, or will be just all speakers' presentations, and then there will be some reflections and discussion? Hope? Or who's going to respond? I don't see Dorota.
I'm
Hope?
here. Hope has
Yeah.
a problem with microphone. She's fighting with microphone. This is the problem.
How will be the flow of the conversation? So the presenters will present one by one, and there was no questions and answers, but this will be at the end.
So we will have a presentation of Alejandro, who's not yet, but hopefully coming in a second. Then the questions, then presentation of Isa and Robert, and then the question and discussion, and then you, and then Rifa.
Okay. So the question and discussion will be more like moderated by you.
Okay, and what about now, guys?
Now it's full screen, yes.
Question whether it is changing. Because I'm
Hope
pressing.
your microphone is now it seems to be open. I don't know if you can hear us.
Yeah, it's changing. The only thing is that it just takes a bit of time, but generally it's fine. Huh?
Jana, I have a question because Hope have a problem with microphone and I don't know much how to help her. Who is here from IT assistant? Who can we ask?
Hi, Dorota. Akram or Ahmed should be here. Maybe we can contact them. Let's see.
Okay, do you have his some contact to him? Because I have only email. I don't know if he'll answer.
But the thing is, if it's a microphone issue, it might be on her end. So I don't know if there's anything that we can do about that.
Maybe Dorota, Hope, maybe you will rejoin because sometimes it happens with MS Teams.
Yes.
No, that's a good idea.
Yes, Hope, please try to do it. Otherwise, I can try to put you through telephone to my microphone, and let's see if it will be good.
That will actually, I think, produce a lot of echo, and I wouldn't advise that. But it must be something regarding her audio settings with Teams. So if she can try all options with audio.
Oh,
yes, we can
hear
hear you now. Perfect.
Yeah, rejoining is always solution with MS Teams.
Wonderful.
Good.
So we solved all the issues with Elizabeth presentation, which looks nice. And I think we can start from the other order if Dorota Hope is fine. I think we don't need to wait for the first speaker. We can start from Isabella and Robert. What do you think?
I think I'm seeing it's 3 o'clock already. I would have loved to put my background, but I think I was disappointed with my desktop, my laptop. Perhaps we can start, Dorota, and in the process I'll be trying to figure out how to put my background, but because I see we already have audience in the house. So,
Lifan, do you have any news from Alessandro?
So all our
I'm in
speakers are here.
communication with him. He couldn't find the link, so I'm just sending him the link. Yeah.
So he's not here because I can see
He's not yet here, it seems. So he's trying hard to find the link.
Yeah.
Hello.
Oh, now he's here. No.
No, it's not him. Hello,
yes.
Marina. Oh, yeah, it's him.
Hello.
Okay.
Hello.
Adriano.
Yeah.
Is he here?
No, I didn't see him.
Oh, Adriano? Oh, yeah, okay, Marina. Okay, not Adriano. Okay. So
good morning, everybody, or good afternoon, wherever you are. We will start in just a few seconds. We are still waiting for one more speaker, but he's joining.
Lee, please alert me when he's in so that I can start. Lee, can you hear me?
yes.
Yeah.
He's trying to join, but
It's fine.
maybe it's not used to you now. The link is the registration link. It's not like Zoom. You have directed the link of the Microsoft Teams, right?
Yeah.
Hello, Manfred. Nice to see you among our participants.
Oh, I can see him.
Hello, Manfred.
Peace to the planet.
In the meantime, we can sing or dance or, you know, say a poem or something like this, just as an amusement. Is Alejandro trying to put his presentation or not? Alejandro,
Hi. Yeah.
hi. Are you trying the presentation? Because as far as I know, you're the first speaker. So we tried already.
Yeah. I'll go right away. I didn't know if there was some introduction to the event and so on. Yes.
No.
Okay. No, I think we should start. Everyone is here now.
Yes.
Yeah. Greetings, everyone. We can officially open this event. Talking to you from South Africa. It's afternoon, 3 p.m. and I'm sure other colleagues are joining from different time zones. And welcome to this event, Cyber Agora. I just want to start off by acknowledging my esteemed colleagues who've been very helpful to put this together. And this is Tiana. I don't know. I know she's here. She's hiding behind the screen there. But I'm sure some of you have received, especially the speakers, emails and communication from her. She's the one assisting us, actually spearheading activities around Cyber Agora. I don't know whether she wants to just show her face so that colleagues knows who I'm talking about. But also, this activity is also under a scientific committee, which is being led by my colleague. Don't know whether Aldrich is here, but is the chairperson of the, I didn't see him earlier on, is the chairperson of the scientific committee who
Here
has
I am.
been very, oh yes, yeah, okay, thank you so much. And thank you for joining us. I just thought I need to start off by acknowledging yourselves. The main idea why we have this event, of course, is one of the many events that has been organized by ISOCARP and the Cyber Agora. But the reason why we are having this one particularly is because of the very fascinating notions around degrowth. Now, if you have been around and different conferences or different spaces, you will realize that there's a different way of understanding what degrowth is. So in other words, there are two different schools of thought. Some people, they are for degrowth, supporting it, that we should be actually going this way because it's a sustainable way, it's the nature way. Then there's another view which says actually we shouldn't be going with the degrowth because we need to industrialize everything. We need the economy. We need to build high, and a whole lot of things. And then as an urban planner, and especially the upcoming planners, then you are in between. Like, what do I do? Do we go with this or we don't go with this? So this platform is a safe platform where we are trying to create a platform for built environment experts who have been writing and reading on degrowth, but also so that they can share their ideologies and their experiences, but also for yourself to be able to engage in the discourse as to why degrowth and why should we go with it and why not. So we're hoping this is the safer space for everyone so we can able to discuss freely. As ISOCARP also, we want to have some position on this. So I'm going to be facilitating this with my colleague, and this is Dorota, and I will then ask her to invite our speakers, to introduce our speakers, and then we will officially start. I don't want to spend too much time to talking, but I want the presenters to have enough time. Thank you so much. Over to you, Dorota.
Thank you very much. So I would like to introduce our first speaker, which is Alejandro de Castro Mazaro. He's a registered architect in Germany and postdoctoral researcher at Leibniz Institute of Ecological, Urban and Regional Development in Dresden. Previously, he has been an urban planning lecturer in Columbia University and Harvard University. Recently, he has published very interesting work beyond urban eco-modernism. How can degrowth align spatial practices, enhance urban sustainability transformation? And we are looking forward also for your insights from this book. He has published many other works on spatial dimension of global produced inequalities in various international scientific journals. So Alejandro, the floor is yours.
And thank you very much, Dorota and colleagues, for the opportunity to discuss these very relevant topics. And I think the point for the discussion raised at the beginning is very relevant. I think I need permission to share my screen. I'm seeing the icon on the top right to share the screen, but it's on gray. It says that organizers of the event need to share the right or something like that. If someone can give me a hint if there is something that I should be doing additionally, let me know.
I think.
Could you
okay.
Hello.
Yes.
Hey, you cannot present right now?
No, I mean, I'm looking at the icon that says in German Thailand, share, and it says only organizers and referents can share. So I assume
I think he used the link that shared by Lifan, which is not that was sent to speakers. Can you send him a new link for speakers or make him?
Yes. Can you try right now?
Yeah, I think now I can. Yes, now it works. Yes. Can you see the presentation?
Yes.
Now? Yes?
Yes, we can.
Thank you. Do I have 20 minutes, 15 minutes, just to make sure that I don't take too much time?
You have 15.
Okay, very well. Thank you very much again for this opportunity. I'm naming my presentation today Frugal Urbanism as, so to say, a more literary attempt to have a plastic idea of what degrowth and urbanism might be related. I'm going to follow today a bit more of a literary narrative to explain how some of the strategies, spatial strategies related to the growth, try to tackle a spatial problem that is a bit hard to understand. So please bear with me, even though I'm a researcher interested, and I've decided to take today a more general approach to the topic. The point of departure is simply that degrowth, in my opinion, tries to tackle the problem of accelerated urban metabolism. That problem of urban metabolism that is accelerated happens mostly in overdeveloped cities. And it tries to address the issue of cities having, so to say, an accelerated digestive system. Even though it might sound very picturesque, the comparison, I will show how it relates. I was putting here one image that describes this complicated thing that we have nowadays to control sugar. This is a very personal take on it. We know that to have a very healthy diet, one should have less sugar. But the truth is that sugar is everyday and ubiquitous. So it happens that even though we know that we have to eat less sugar, somehow we don't know how to do it. And the reality is that while sugar is very visible, what is very hard to locate sometimes is where is the damage of sugar being done. It means that the organism of the body, we can identify what things are good or bad very easily, but it's hard to know where the damage is located. In this case, the damage by excessive sugar eating can be located, for example, in the regulation of the pancreas to regulate insulin. And there's something very hidden and abstract as a concept. So while we know that diabetes is increasing in countries like Germany, it's a very abstract illness that is a bit hard to embody. So in that sense, I find that it's a very odd fight, how to fight an accelerated metabolism if it's such a complex matter. Now, the critique on ecomodernism and, so to say, the high-tech mentality on urban sustainability is that it proposes a system of spatial development based on high metabolic rate of consumption. That means it imagines, yes, cities as organisms, and I'm presenting here an image from Patrick Abercrombie, this metaphor of the city as an organism, but it proposes that we recirculate matter coming in and out of cities quickly and efficiently. That means we make buildings, demolish buildings, make more efficient building, demolish them, make more efficient building, upcycle, and so on and so forth. So we have a cycle of continued improvement, but made at the expense of increased consumption. This is one image of one of those centers, both in my city in Dresden, where consumption takes place both in the terms of commodities and buildings. You know, this type of big architecture, climatic, like heated, where people go to consume and dispose, and then consume and dispose, etc., etc. Now, these conversations should be located, as I said before, in the global north or overdeveloped cities. And by overdeveloped cities means those cities that already have basic infrastructure, even advanced infrastructure, in which now can have, so to say, the privilege to reduce the amount of infrastructure and services that it has. This is an image of Dresden, my city, which is a beautiful one in the east part of Germany. And the issue is that, coming back to the metaphor with the organism, is that when one looks at this image, it doesn't sound that the organism of the city is ill. It looks green, buildings are there, they're old roofs, etc. So one of the hardships that I find has to be overcome is to detail what are the harmful parts of this continued technological acceleration that we have in architecture and urban development. And to say that, I have to phrase briefly the model behind this image of the city. So this image of the city is actually quite good and efficient. It follows a certain rationale, and the rationale under this eco-modern dynamic comes from, let's say, economic theory from the mid-20th century in what is called the 𝐒𝐞𝐦𝐢𝐧𝐚 hypothesis. The hypothesis being that societies historically, they go in from pre-industrial to industrial to post-industrial economies, and in that period, they increase at the beginning their environmental pollution, but they get to a certain turning point by which efficiency increases, reduces pollution. That means that it accelerates production until production is more efficient and pollution will decrease. Examples that we have might be Manchester, 19th century versus 21st century in terms of pollution. Even the Elbe River in my city could be an example of how better has it gone. And it has to do with also the idea that economic growth can be decoupled from inequality. So one can grow economically through industrialization, and at the end, at the beginning, inequality will rise, but then will be reduced. In our research, we have identified, so to say, what are the spatial translations of these eco-modern strategies. And we identified at 3 levels, construction, building scale, and urban scale. I will go very quickly onto that. Basically, the main directions, eco-modernism, this green growth mentality goes into spatial development, has to do with high-tech material systems and industrial upcycling, here shown by the Garden by the Bay Park in Singapore at a building level. It speaks about nature in facades, by which there are these sophisticated systems that can enable nature to be incorporated in buildings. And in the case of urban areas, it has to do with green revitalization of city centers. And for new cities, that's something more related to Chinese context and also Southeast Asian. other, maybe also African context, let's say for newly developed cities, eco-villages and smart cities. Last but not least, also the use of industrialized wooden materials for structural bearing. Now, the problem with that narrative is that it looks at sustainability as an aggregate of characteristics of an object. If we look at Werner Sobeck's famous house R128, we can see that it's a wonderful house. It's extremely efficient, but if we look at the urban fabric it is set in, it is an urban fabric that is suburban and requires a high amount of infrastructure to service very few people. If we look at the building from Boeri, the Bosco Verticale, we can see that also we need a certain infrastructure to service green areas, and that infrastructure is invisible. If we basically look at buildings in general infrastructure, we can look at that, for example, in the case of steel, we do need mines to service those buildings. And by the way, in Europe, iron mines are almost depleted, other than in the northern countries. That means that we need to go to other landscapes to service those materials. All in all, the problem that we have is that we keep, in this metabolic metaphor, we keep excreting materials to produce cities to the point where we have excreted more anthropogenic mass than global biomass is in the planet. This is something recently from 2021. And most of it has to do with infrastructure and construction. Concrete in this diagram, sorry that I turned it, it was complicated to see vertically, represents around 1/4 of all anthropogenic mass. Bricks is like 1/10, aggregates like sand, gravel are another 1/4, and then we have asphalt like another 6. So basically, urbanization is very much related to this metabolic rate of consumption. And the point that I want to make before I jump into alternatives is that that overproduction of infrastructure is not something related to the extraction in some places, but it's the production of entire places that produce cities. We only, for example, we do need huge amounts of water to produce all sorts of construction materials for concrete, cement, etc., which requires to harvest natural areas. We need to harvest natural areas for the extraction of gravel. This is one area around my city in Dresden. We need huge amount of steel into mining in resource frontiers that we have to extract. And we need for the mobility of the new cars that are supposed to be ecological to extract and manufacture, for example, lithium as here in Chile, as well as we need infrastructure, a huge amount of space to stock the piles of materials that are part of cities. This is one. And last but not least, we also need a lot of spaces, landscapes that need to be produced to depose, to excrete the materials that cities are made of. To respond to this dilemma, degrowth and post-growth as separate elements of analysis, they have come to counter the hypothesis of green growth. And what they come to say is that there is no natural relationship between economic growth and environmental reduction. They show that inequality in northwestern countries has increased along with economic growth, so there is no natural relationship with it. And also they have shown that degrowth and GDP increase and resource consumption and GDP increase are more or less correlated. So to respond to these problems related to green growth, we have been working in characterizing different degrowth-oriented solutions for spatial development. We have divided them. This is part of a paper in Urban Studies of 2020. We divided them based on a literature search on building scale, neighborhood scale, and city scale operations. You can see here that there are several strategies, building retrofitting that is non-financialized, technologies that are convivial, urban renaturation that it doesn't include city but unsealing, and then also at a city scale, urban revitalization without financialization. Here, what I'm bringing, and I didn't want to bring too many cases because it becomes a little bit of a glossary, but what I wanted to bring here some snapshots of how of strategies that we can use to counter or to complement, so to say, efficiency gains through the growth strategies. At an urban level, one of the postulates of degrowth says that what we have to do is to unseal urban land to decrease the amount of areas that car traffic has, to decrease pollution, to decrease individual transportation, and to provide more biodiversity, communal uses, etc. I think examples from Barcelona right now, who are implementing super blocks, is very, very relevant, and they are operating at an urban massive scale, little by little, providing examples like this one, pedestrianizing and opening streets. At a smaller scale, there are very few examples that showcase how to reduce the metabolism of urban design in cities, but one of the examples that I think everybody should be looking at a little bit is the project from Lacaton and Vassal from 1996, the Plans Leon Cook, where a competition was made to renovate the plaza, and the response from the architects was to do nothing, literally, but to take cars out of the road and to change where trash cans were, saying that they would preserve the character of the original plaza, which provided what people needed. That not doing nothing is a very, unless it's necessarily, is a principle that is very relevant. I'm finishing almost now. I present a couple more cases. In terms of building scale, there are ideas about what to do instead of demolishing buildings. An example in Germany, where all buildings were to be demolished due to shrinkage, and the city and the architects decided to change the typology, demolish strategically some parts so that people could enjoy bigger houses with a different typology and preserve the structure. Several examples that I'm presenting here. Some are learning how to reuse construction materials or construction systems and reuse all buildings, as well as using new construction materials. This is a very tricky part, in this case, using kind of earthworks materials for the construction of houses. Last example here is an example of a Belgian practice, Rotor, who I think was a pioneer. Now this is growing in many directions. It was a pioneer in salvaging materials and preparing them for reuse in other construction areas. So the idea that buildings can be demolished and simply meshed down is something Degrowth tries not to do, as a way to slower the metabolism of cities and to reuse every grain of energy that has been embodied in buildings. That's all of it. I thank you for your attention, and I look forward to the discussion. And I'm going to disconnect the screen whenever I know how to do it. Just give me a second. Yeah.
Thank you so much for that insightful presentation. I'm also mindful that you need to leave, if I'm not correct. If I'm correct. May I then invite some questions? And I also want to ask colleagues on this call, if you can, if you can also just drop us a line and tell us who you are and greet us, but also feel free to send some questions on the chat there, if you can write something on the chat. I see Dr. Ulrich, our chair for scientific committee, signed us up. I'll start with you while I'm waiting for some questions from colleagues via WhatsApp, via chat, if you can. Thank you. Over to you.
Yeah, thank you very much, Alejandro, for your very interesting presentation. I was a little bit surprised. I used to work at the same institute where you are working now, but that was in the 90s and early 2000s. And you mentioned just with one word, the shrinking of cities. But I think in the 90s, that was the starting point, the degrowth in Eastern Germany. So because 1 million people had left Eastern Germany, they had a lot of empty houses, so many apartments. And I think they cut down the number of apartments by 200,000 or 300,000. And you mentioned you had this one picture where you showed how they renovated them by using part of the houses but destroying some others. I was hoping to hear a little bit what happened with this with these shrinking cities. Is that still a subject? It sounded more like something which has faded away, because in cities like Dresden and Leipzig, they are not shrinking anymore. They are growing. But in the countryside, there is still, in the smaller cities, there is still this shrinking going on. How is that, or is it at all related to your research work?
Thank you. Very quickly, in case there are other questions, the issue of urban shrinkage is still an issue. It's still a problem, and I would say it remains. That's not my main work. My main work is about the research to find out the landscape where construction materials come from. But there is a research area that here works a lot in neighboring towns with Poland and Czech Republic, which are suffering, and also northern Saxony. I think that where we are not at the same level, so while the problem remains and it's a material political problem, I would say it's severe. I find that it's a very severe problem because of the lack of services. What I think is that there is a new, hopefully upcoming industry of a building part reuse that might come into play, where people through digital services and so on can really offer the dismounting of buildings as to sell parts. And that is what has to be seen, whether it goes or not, because there is a certain economies of scale that are being coupled with new software technologies and apps that are really making it very easy to, so to say, buy doors or buy floors. It's an issue of demand.
Thank you.
Thank you so much, Dr. Ulrich. I can see we have a question from Rolf. Over to you. Can you just ask your question? I see you have typed something there. Rolf, it's our old board member. Do you want to ask your question?
Yes, thank you, Alejandro. I am with my mobile here. I'm unpacking. I just arrived back, and I was very fascinated about your approach and your connection or your comparison with diabetes, because actually I have several members of my family affected by the disease, and you know that there are two types. That there is like the born type and the provoked type, and I think the relationship can be so, because diabetes is an effect of an unbalance between consume of calories, in this case consume of sugar, and the burning of this energy, or the not burning of this energy. So I think cities that grow and do not use this growth, they tend to then sprawl and tend to become just more expensive and cannot cope with the costs of the growth. And I think that comparison is valuable. But my point is, I would not say per se that sugar or that this consume is necessarily bad. It always has to be balanced with the use or with how you take advantage of these additional elements that come into the city. That was my comment.
Absolutely. I don't know if I will use the example in the future, because I'm not an expert on diabetes, and I completely agree with you. I mean, sugar is not bad. We need sugar to live. But I don't know, let's say, if the metaphor might go into corners that are not good. But I found that it was relevant, that it has to do with visible and invisible manifestations of consumption. And in this case, the same way with sugar, let's say, when we see it everywhere, but it's not, so to say, the consumption of sugar, it doesn't produce an effect that is immediate and very visible. The same way resource consumption in cities occurs, but is a bit intractable. Where do the rebars come from? It's a very complicated thing, but it does have an effect that accumulates in time. So I'm trying to find a metaphor that helps to make that case. But I agree with you. I'm not saying that sugar is bad or something. We should consider zero sugar, but make use of it.
Yeah, or you can use a different type of sugar, no, a less aggressive, let's say, type of sugar. So it's a very interesting comparison. That was my comment.
Thank you so much. I want to put my two colleagues on the spot here, and this is Martina and Sabina, because I see they're typing something. And this will be the last questions I'm taking for you, Rajendra. Then we go to the other speakers, and I'll hand over to Dorota. I don't know, Martina, do you want to just reflect quickly on what you're writing? Then Sabina, or any of you can go first, it's fine.
Okay, I'll go first. The examples are all very good, but still they're at the local scale. What can you say at the city scale? So the shrinking, the need to shrink anyway, and maybe proactively shrink the boundary, the size, the extent of cities, but also the impact or the preservation of national systems, and therefore the need to move away from national systems and let them breathe. So I just wanted to know whether you had any comment to make on that.
Okay, can I also take Sabina so that you can answer to one, so we move to the next presentation? Sabina, can you come through, please? I see you wrote something, but I just want you to say it out. Okay, maybe let's deal with Martina's one for now.
Are you heading me?
Yes, I was
Okay,
replacing. I'm putting both of you
sorry.
on the spot so that you can respond.
Okay, that's fine. Well, thanks for the presentation. I'm joining with my students here. They're also watching, although they're not registered. We are in class. So we have a question that can we talk about degrowth strategies in a city which has been like growing over the last 20 years without a master plan? We are located in Cyprus, Famagusta. It's a historic city, and the city has been growing like randomly, spontaneously. It may sound weird to you, but that's the case in Cyprus. And then and it's a historic city as well. So there's cultural development. The city is populating with a lot of student population, tourists, or immigrants, but there's no plan. And the city is growing. So can we have degrowth strategies in such an environment?
Thank you for the questions. I wish I could answer them quickly. Of course, I don't have the answer for both of them, but I really appreciate the feedback. Very quickly, my point on both of them, I would say, at an urban level, the general arc for both of them is that what is relevant is to reduce entropy. That's what it would be saying. And entropy means it's the throughput of matter and energy, because that has to do with the resource the resource consumption that is excessive. So at an urban scale, yes, it is important to keep to stop sprawl. That absolutely, whether that's with a line or that, I'm not sure. In the case of Germany, I will give the example. Germany consumes, I think, 60 hectares of land, transforms 60 hectares of land into urban land per day. It's around 60, maybe the name is not exactly. And every year, there is more residential space per inhabitant. And that is what is excessive entropy. So what it would need a city is to reduce the amount of urban land required, so to transform urban land uses into non-urban land uses, and to reduce the amount of residential space per person. That means changing typologies, adapting typologies, making collective uses. In the case of a city that is unplanned, the question is whether you can organize the growth from the top down or whether it is a bottom-up activity. In the case of Barcelona, that has been done from the municipality. So this pedestrianization is done for the municipality. But it is true, it's a good question, because in general, the growth activities try to have convivial technologies and have, so to say, bottom-up approaches that don't require big industrial actors. But it's hard to know how can you scale up activities that are done from the bottom up. So my impression is that at an urban scale, you will need to have certain coordinated action to produce post-growth or to reduce the entropy or the material consumption of the city, unless there is some social enclave or social circumstance Unfortunately, let me put an example, and I will close with this. If you think about what is happening right now in Cuba, where there is a blackout that has lasted several days, it's a disgrace and it's a very, very unfortunate situation. But drastic situations maybe allow people to reinvent so material networks differently. But let's say that's out of crisis, not out of kind of political will. So ideally, it would be something coalesced from a government perspective. And these are both tentative answers without really obviously knowing what to answer. Thank you very much.
Thank you so much for those comments and obviously your responses to all of them. Alejandra, we have one more question. I don't know how quick you can be to answer that. I don't want to leave it hanging when we go to the next session. After you answer that, I will ask that Dorota take us to the next presentation with speakers. So I don't know whether you're able to read the chat where you are.
Yes, yes.
But there's a comment from Diana there.
Yeah.
She's asking how can we best relate degrowth to smart growth and strategies in green belts?
Yeah. It's a good question because I don't think degrowth and smart growth or green growth are dialectical opposite, meaning it's not either or, but it's both and. The question for me is what is the first priority and what is the second one? So efficiency and sufficiency are both valuable. For me, they are valuable as much as, and I dare here to launch as far as the efficiency gained by smart growth is not wasted through financialization or, let's say, luxurious living. It means if you want to create a city with a green belt that is very efficient, that is wonderful. But if you do it to have huge amount of, let's say, heated areas and huge living quarters, so that there is a huge amount of things that are unnecessary, those gains might be lost by the amount of resource consumption that you have. So the balance is that both strategies need to keep together. Smart cities should be also sufficient. And so efficiency and sufficiency should be on the same line and not separated. One cannot have a sufficient, huge, so to say, hotel resort in the middle of, I don't know where, to put it in a bad example. I hope it helped. Thank you.
Thank you, Alejandro. I think it was very, very insightful. I have an impression that if we are speaking about the smart growth, smartness is more a tool. And if we are thinking about the growth, it is a paradigm on which we are working.
Mm-hmm. Good, yeah. Good idea.
Okay. Generally, now we will have a next presentation. This will be a double presentation of Izabela Mironowicz and Robert Skrzydczyński. And then I would like to introduce Izabela Mironowicz. She often calls herself radical urbanist. Normally, she is professor at the Department of Urban Design and Regional Planning at Faculty of Architecture, Gdańsk University of Technology, studying transformation of the cities, but also this challenge we face today is the planetary multi-crisis. She advocates for degrowth and explore how its postulates can be implemented in urban area. She's also been a visiting professor in Université Paris-Sorbonne and Université des Alpes in Grenoble. She sits in scientific advisory board of Leibniz Institute for Ekologische Raumplanung in Dresden and Vice Slovak Accreditation Commission. She also has been Secretary General of Association of European Schools of Planning. This is Izabela. And then Robert Skrzydczyński, who is also urbanist, adjunct at the same university, Gdańsk University of Technology. His work centered around modeling the growth-oriented urban regional metabolism scenario about the growth policy formulation. He's also working with the multi-species cities concept, coexistence of human and other urban animals. Actually, I really, having together the classes, I remember his strong attitude into challenging myth of green capitalism. He always advocates for democratic and socially just transitions. So please, I'm welcoming your presentation. Isabella, you will start, yes?
No, I will
Robert will start. Okay, Robert,
can you see my screen?
Yes, we can see your screen.
Okay. So let me just enter full screen mode. Is it okay now? Can you see the slides changing?
It's good. Yes.
Okay, so thank you. And first of all, well, thank you for the organization of this event. And thank you, Alejandro, for a fantastic presentation. Our talk, our presentation will be a bit more technical. So I think it will be a great complementary input for our discussion. So I will start. I will just like to make sure that we are all on the same page. I'm sure that most of you have heard of the term the Anthropocene, right? So a new geological epoch, which is literally translated as the epoch of man, the human epoch, which is also technically an epoch of growth, right? Most scientists, they would argue for around 1950, the year 1950 as the beginning of the Anthropocene. And this is precisely when many indicators of human socioeconomic activity began to grow exponentially. And with them, also Earth system trends, such as the emission of greenhouse gases or the acidification of the oceans or the degradation of biosphere, right? So as a result, we are now, well, the Earth systems science has developed this concept of planetary boundaries, which are transgressed as a result of these epoch of growth, you could say, this really unprecedented quantity and pace, tempo of growth. And the situation with them is, of course, as you might suspect, getting worse, except for the stratospheric ozone depletion, which is in fact the only boundary that we had been transgressing, but then we came back into this safe operating space for humanity, right? So this space where we are not disturbing systems such as climate or the circulation of water or this global circulation of phosphorus or nitrogen, which are important elements that we are using for agriculture. So this concept is kind of useful for understanding our impact on the stability of our planet as a system. And of course, this problem is recognized by almost everyone, right? And so people wouldn't discuss the scientific basis of climate change, for example, or of the biodiversity loss, but they, of course, propose different solutions. And Alejandro has already mentioned the concept of green growth, which is, you could say, which is our standard response today, which is we can have economic growth while reducing our impact on the stability of Earth systems, such as the climate. In fact, if you go back to the idea of sustainable development, this is also very closely related because in the original Brundtland report, you can see that the idea is that, yes, we have to reduce the environmental impacts, but we can have a new era of economic growth at the same time. Alejandro already mentioned the term decoupling, right, which is the mechanism by which green growth is supposed to work. You can have more economic output. This should, in fact, grow exponentially, not linearly, while reducing the environmental impact, which you can measure in different ways, like CO2 emissions or biodiversity loss or land use, right, land consumption, etc. Now, the idea behind green growth is that we are actually decoupling some of our environmental impacts from economic growth. Here you can see an example for CO2. Alejandro was showing the chart for material consumption, which isn't really decoupling, but in the case of CO2 emissions, yes, there is some decoupling of economic growth from per capita economic growth from per capita CO2 emissions. However, for decoupling as a strategy to be effective, you cannot just rely on some amount of decoupling, right? You have to have sufficient absolute decoupling. So you have to have a strong, let's say, decoupling, which would take us back into the safe operating space within planetary boundaries. And not only you need a sufficiently strong decoupling, it also has to happen sufficiently fast, right? So depending on, in this example, again, CO2 emissions, which is only, and climate change, but which is, remember, only one of the 9 planetary boundaries. But using this example, the more time we lose before implementing, fast decoupling, the less CO2 we will be able to emit in order not to transgress the remaining carbon budget, right? So in order not to cause, let's say, a 2-degree warming or a 1.5 degree warming. So how are we doing, right? So if this is supposed to work, then let's see how we're doing. And the problem is that all of the recent reviews of studies, of academic studies on decoupling, including the latest one cited here, they basically say that those rates of decoupling that we have, of course, depending on different materials or CO2 emissions, they are slightly different. But in general, even for CO2 emissions that you saw just a moment ago, those rates of decoupling cannot bring us just by themselves back to the safe operating space within planetary boundaries. So kind of like Alejandro hinted, yes, we need efficiency, we need to have something, but we just cannot rely on decoupling as the only strategy that we employ to secure a truly sustainable and stable future for humans and for other species. Now, despite this evidence, most of our policies related to development, including spatial development, are still to some extent relying on economic growth. Here you can see the 3 key aspects of the European Green Deal strategy, including economic growth decoupled from resource use. And here sustainable development goals, which are kind of in the middle, because they both have economic growth as the 8th, decent work and economic growth as the 8th sustainable development goal, but also circular, as this chart is suggesting, consumption and production. Now, this is where degrowth and post-growth scholars and activists come to the debate. They say you just cannot eat the cake and have it too, right? So what are they proposing instead? You have already seen quite a lot of proposals discussed by Alejandro. Here, let me just make it clear that post-growth is a broader term for many different concepts, such as donut economics, for example, or steady-state economics, or degrowth. As a matter of fact, degrowth is one example of the broader post-growth, let's say, family of concepts and proposals. And degrowth basically says that because decoupling and green growth cannot work on its own, we also need a planned and socially just reduction in the metabolism, the global metabolism, which is production and consumption, that would be safe from the perspective of planetary boundaries, and which would be enabling everyone to live as a good life as possible. Now, it's very important here to clarify that degrowth is not about economic recession, and this is a common misunderstanding that degrowth is aiming to reduce GDP. While in practice, degrowth wants to reduce the scale of the global metabolism, and whether GDP will fall down or increase at the same time, that doesn't really matter as much. But if we agree that they are correlated, then yes, GDP will also fall. The first time that degrowth was, suggested, not even maybe described, but suggested as a concept was in the 1970s. You had the debate about limits to growth, and it's very important to know that the environmental or ecological crises are not the only way that you can reach the concept of degrowth. Degrowth is also rooted in social sciences, where you have, which is also rooted in the 1970s, where you had criticisms of the assumption that economic growth is always, under any circumstances, producing socially useful outcomes. Sometimes it is, but it's not necessarily so. So things like the Easterlin paradox, right? The paradox, or maybe a kind of obvious, obvious result of empirical research, that happiness is at some point not correlated with increases in personal or in per capita wealth, per capita GDP of a country. And a more cultural perspective, here you have many post-colonial studies, many global justice considerations, right, and criticisms of techno-optimism, for example, which is also an important cornerstone for degrowth. Today, degrowth is both an academic research field and a social movement, so we also have to be aware that degrowth has, and is very clear about its normative assumptions, right? So it's not just a technocratic concept to be implemented, it's a social movement at the same time. As Alejandro emphasized, and this is very important, degrowth is aimed, in the metabolic sense, right, is aimed mostly at the global north, overdeveloped countries, so countries which are already meeting the basic and non-basic needs of their inhabitants, and which, but who consume in total an excess amount of resources, which are then not available for global south countries. And so, finishing my part, and I will pass to Isabella to describe more detailed policies and urban policies. Based on these three, you can say, cornerstones of degrowth, it is proposing three types of broad changes, one of which is the metabolic one, the ecological economic one, right? So to reduce the environmental impact. The second one, which is as important as the first one, is to have it done socially, in a way which is socially just, which will most probably, this is the argument, involve some kind of redistribution between and within countries. And the third cornerstone, which is a cultural transition, right? Being able to live fulfilling lives in a world where we don't rely on consumerism, for example, on consumption, to the extent that we are today. So it's very important to understand that degrowth is not, a set of applicable solutions. It's a, you could even say it's a it's a change on the level of our development paradigms, you could say, right? And here I will pass to Isa, and she will discuss urban policies and let's say practical interventions in line with degrowth.
Hopefully you have already noticed the change in presentation. Did you know?
Yes, we did.
Okay, thank you. So, as Robert mentioned, there are already selected instruments for the growth. This is where the question, which has been directed to Alejandro, is trying to be resolved, because it is both top-down and bottom-up activities that could help to implement the postulates of the growth. And many of these tools, as you can see probably later on, because definitely you cannot read them all now, they have a strong or even direct link to cities. But what I want to show is that the concept of the growth in cities is much more advanced, and I'm pretty aware that I'm speaking to mostly urban and regional planners, so I try to focus on especially this aspect of policies. But let me begin with perhaps from not very obvious perspective. The question in our presentation is not whether the growth is good for cities, but why it is good. And there is a podcast by Nate Hagen's The Great Simplification, which, by the way, I strongly recommend you all to follow, which tries to explain the predicament we are all in. And towards the end of each conversation, Nate asks his guests this question you see on the slide. What do you care about most in the world? And no one answered, I care most about my car, or I care most about my home, or certainly not, I care most about my bank account. The answers were about loved ones, about nature, about beauty, about peace. These are the values that the growth demands. So when we think of the growth, we think of conviviality, companionship, friendship, sharing, caring. We think of abundance, not limitations. And we think of places where we can find what we care about most. So how we can imagine these cities. As we all know, space is a resource of planet. And like any other resource, it is by its very nature limited. We can't afford luxury or even excess for everyone. That's a false promise of capitalism. But if we share goods we seek, access to green space, or more broadly to nature, places to socialize, different forms of education, sport facilities, health centers, culture, much more, we can certainly afford them. 𝐾𝐥𝐿 𝐬𝐵, for example, argues for private sufficiency and public luxury. Anyone watching this presentation will get the message. It's clear and it's convincing. Having a private swimming pool steals precious water from the community. Having a public swimming pool strengthens relationship within the community. Which of the two we should choose? Do you think perhaps that private sufficiency and public luxury would have to be unattractive? And then these solutions would not capture the imagination of people? I do not agree. We already have examples of such solutions. Probably many people in the world would love to live in such conditions, with shared swimming pool on the roof and beautiful view of the city of Vienna, in modest but functional apartments and generous green spaces around. We should add that this estate is owned by the city of Vienna. Is that a good or bad city? Is the quality of life here good or bad? And good city can also mean reducing consumption and therefore production in a way that does not compromise the quality of life, but the opposite. Perhaps it's better to use a shared laundry room in an apartment building than to have washing machine in your own bathroom. This shared washing machine will be of better quality and better suited to our needs. That's efficiency. And we will have, we all will have more space in the bathroom. How about the children not having those ridiculous hundreds of individual toys, but sharing one big playroom with toys in an apartment block and perhaps a part of the garden? How often have you used the electric drill you have at home? How many times you need a screwdriver? Or maybe we should have a shared toolbox instead of buying these thousands of things we rarely use. What about co-working spaces in apartment buildings or neighborhoods? These practices can be extended in many ways and in different areas. And all of them, which is super important for the growth, require good convivial relations with neighbors. Just as a side story, I would like to mention that the urban aspect of sharing rather than owning is already practiced in a business way, but on the fringes of the mainstream in the global north. On the contrary, it's very often at the heart of everyday practice in the global south. So we typically think about shared cars or bikes, but of course there are many other possibilities. And when we think of urban development, we very often think about urban development as a process of creation, right? We forget and often don't want to know that it involves the destruction of the Earth's life-supporting systems, and Alejandro was presenting this as well. For example, not to go too far, like lithium, right? The extraction of such an essential resource as sand poses significant environmental and socio-political risks, as they say. We simply don't want to see them, but they are also about planning and urban development. This is where our work begins, or should begin. But this is not just about sand, right? So we are consuming more and more, and the efficiency here doesn't work because we are just producing more and more, and there are more and more people on the planet Earth. So we are consuming biomass, fossil fuels, metals, all kind of other materials. And the construction is a sector with the largest material footprint. Some of you know works of Professor William Rees, the former director of School of Community and Regional Planning at the University of British Columbia in Canada, who developed the concept of the ecological footprint with his students. They continue to count year after year how much we are overusing the Earth resources. Recently, this is from this year, 1.75 Earth renewable resources every year, also to build our cities, right? This cannot continue much longer. We have to change the approach. And what we need, and Alejandro mentioned it already, is a planned reduction of all environmentally damaging and socially alienating activities. But at the same time, and this is equally important, there should be a planned increase in all activities that regenerate ecosystem and improve social well-being. And this change itself must be fast, but it must lead to a life which is much, much slower. There is also academia working on it, and this dialogue between spatial planning and degrowth is still rather weak, but it's getting stronger and stronger. What policies support the implementation of degrowth postulates in cities? You see some of them on the slide, and I'm not going to elaborate all of them, but instead, although perhaps I would mention only one, that we, for example, need a new planning tools that focus on not what is to be built, but on how much resources it will use. That's a completely different approach that we have now. So I will not analyze these policies in detail, but I will try to show how they can manifest themselves in cities. And I would like to draw your attention to what we already have in our hands today. It's just that we are afraid to make use of it. So first, in urban areas, the implementation of degrowth means no development on open, previously undeveloped land. Such policies are already being implemented in practice, for example, in Belgium, in Flanders. The result, of course, is an increase in population density in already built-up areas. It is therefore important how this densification can be achieved. On the one hand, through transformation, and on the other hand, through increasing the density of areas that have a very low urban density, I would say low urbanity, right? So what you see on this slide, these are examples of transformation, right? Urban retrofitting, so to speak. Old military barracks, housing which have been transformed into housing neighborhoods with variety of public and commercial facilities, Gdańsk, Grenoble, Salzburg, many others, right? But there is also a question about densification, right? The second route. And to do this, we need to look for the optimum density. And you may ask, well, what this optimum means in this context? Well, it means ensuring a minimum standard for all residents while reducing the negative impact on the environment. That's clear. And what is perhaps very interesting, that both extremes, very low and very high densities, are areas of negative environmental impact. So we are looking somewhere in the middle, right? And both extreme densities, which is also kind of interesting, are favored by the ultra-rich people. Oxfam recently found that the billionaire emits 1 million more times greenhouse gases than the average person, and property is part of this performance. Have you noticed that the question of density usually refers to development that are already quite dense? The question of how to achieve densification in areas of low density, such as single-family housing or commercial activities, has long been avoided in planning practice and spatial policy. But it's changing too. Perhaps not everyone would agree with the former Flemish architect's firm statement on the slide, but it touches on an important issue. How can densification be carried out in a fair and responsible way, also from the environmental point of view? Avoiding low density housing appears to be linked to improving housing availability. Interesting, isn't it? Increasing density in low density areas is not only a matter of social justice, but also a matter of environmental responsibility, yet they both should be practiced or implemented in a very gentle way. It cannot be done by force. Again, it's happening. There are policies already on the table where we can see them in practice. For example, here is a city of Vancouver, where municipality adopts a resolution to create planning tools to facilitate densification. The same policy goes for London. And again, to be clear, increased density is often demanded by growth economy, by developers. I'm far from supporting these claims of increasing density for profit. Density is about improving quality of life, not increasing the bank accounts of developers, landowners, and property speculators. Second point, very urban, is that urban form is very important. An urban form then encourages sharing and togetherness, a layout from which it is difficult to extract private because the space is designed for sharing, right, for commoning. Beautiful park or meadow, accessible to all, requires a certain configuration of space. Don't you think that it's time to revise the criticism of the legacy of the post-war mass housing programs? I'm not really sure why they are often called modernism, but okay, this is the tradition. But sometimes they are also called large housing estates. They are the size of a small town and have all the necessary facilities. There are nurseries, there are schools, libraries, senior clubs, sport facilities, medical centers, shops and cafes. Children walk to school without having to cross the street. No excess, but nothing really missing. Aren't they a good example of what we can actually call good quality of life? Do we really need to keep looking for a 15-minute city model? In many cities, we also see a specific form of ownership of large housing estates. For example, non-profit housing associations, which of course can help us to reduce the demand for growth and financialization of housing. It is important to note that common areas in these places are usually green. The role of these estates in greening the city cannot be underestimated. Overestimated, right? That would be right. They are also important in terms of ventilation, preventing urban heat islands, and of course the retention, the water retention potential should be also recognized. In other words, they can be crucial in helping us to imagine high-quality urban ecological systems. Yes, I'm pretty aware that there are negative narratives about these places, but if we're looking for a model of urban life that they provide, that would be a model of good and fair access to resources, and this pattern in this context cannot be ignored. Of course, there are some good news. What we are seeing is a return to this concept of organizing space, for example, in one of the world's most livable cities in Vienna. The next point is that design of the neighborhoods should also facilitate social interactions through informal contacts. This is an important thing from a community building point of view or perspective. And of course, commoning can manifest itself in a variety of practices that are largely determined by the organization of space. Take urban gardening as an example. It also has some potential for self-sufficiency in the neighborhoods. However, it has more of well-being dimension than the actual food supply, which is also kind of important. When we think about how cities should function, we cannot ignore the consumption of energy and non-renewable resources, especially water. Some researchers argue that more than half of energy consumption in cities in the global north can be attributed to the way land is used. So we need to focus not only on how we generate energy, although this is, of course, obviously important, but also on how we consume it. The same goes for water. And this has implication for planning across scales and sectors. For example, transport planning that allows water to be recirculated rather than wasted, right? Well, if we need more localized, slower lifestyles than we have today, and if we plan cities in a way that takes into account energy and resource consumption, then individual car travel does not have to be the dominant form of mobility, does it? By the way, it won't be anyway, because the resources that allow it to expand are running out. But instead, we need an efficient public transport. This transport should have a clear priority over the private car, and it can be an excellent area for practicing public luxury. And just, by the way, don't buy into electric car greenwash, right? Then, changing priorities leads to changes in land use. For example, car parks can and should be reduced, especially in dense urban areas. They can be converted to many other more useful urban functions. As you can see, this can be done again gradually or gently, as with densification. If you think as urban planner, whether we are going to plan housing where we do not provide parking spaces for individual cars at all, you might be surprised. As you see, this is not a utopia. And again, does it look that bad? As we mentioned already, the Degrowth agenda insists on limiting ecologically destructive projects such as oversized new buildings, new stadiums for Olympic Games or World Cups. Of course, excessive tourism and associated short-term rentals are also among these destructive industries. Reducing them would change both the landscape in cities and the way cities function. Are you sure that it would be for worse? There is one point where everybody agrees very easily, and that's advertisement. There are not many objections to get rid of it, right? And finally, raising minimum living standards is also part of the growth. This justice has a community cost dimension, and of course it has also a spatial dimension. Will eliminating private, inaccessible areas in cities make them better or worse? Will allocating more space to public transport, cycling and walking than to private cars be more or less just? Can't change the slide, sorry. Okay, now it's more. Improving the quality of life does not to have cost a lot of money. We've been talking about this connection between smart city and the growth city. And actually, we might use solutions which Richard Sennett very cleverly calls cheap improvements. Don't have the funds for an expensive green roof? No problem. White paint is not that expensive. Just paint it white. That would help to reduce urban heat island. In Los Angeles, they paint the streets white to lower the temperature. It is estimated actually that it reduces the temperature by 4 to 5 degrees. Worth it. The same goes for unsealing the surface. It doesn't need to be very expensive. Of course, it not only lowers the temperature, but it makes it easier for water to circulate. Perhaps instead of air conditioning and all these fancy new buildings, we can just put some greenery on the walls, not necessarily in Bosco Verticale. That would further increase the circulation of water. Are they all good or bad solution for cities and quality of life? My two final slides. Over the years, urban planners have repeated the mantra of putting people first, people and their needs. It's time to change the approach. To illustrate the essence of this shift, I used the diagram from Markus Hedorfer, president of ECTP. I don't know whether it is on your left or on your right, so on one side of this slide. Let us remember that we are part of nature. We can aspire to be its guardians, but we will not survive if we continue very foolishly to think of ourselves as it rules. Our planning system must reflect this new perspective, simply because it is good for us too. I'm amused by those who claim that degrowth is a return to the caves. I hear this argument from time to time. With the feet on the accelerator on the CUVs, the critics have simply no time to contemplate what is really important. Cities designed with the growth in mind would give us all much better life. In lieu of conclusion, I invite you to visit a website of the Post-Growth Cities Coalition, and you see the address of this website on the slide. And join us. Thank you.
Thank you so much, Isabel, for that insightful presentation together with Robert. We really appreciated your input. It was very detailed and very insightful. And I think we need to also request our audience to engage with the presentation which has been put in front of us. I'm taking questions at this point. I'm seeing, I think it's Arish's hand is up, or is that Aliga's hand, old hand? I'm not sure. Can I get questions from the audience? Arish, your hand is up. Lee, your hand is up. I'm recognizing Lee first because Ulrich is not here. Over to you, Lee.
Hello, thank you so much for the great presentation. So I have several questions, but let me first ask about the concept for Robert. In the last in the first presentation, we have discussed about smart growth and degrowth, and then you mentioned the green growth. And perhaps I ask both presenters or three presenters, how do you look at degrowth and green growth? How do you differentiate this concept? Yeah, thank you.
Thank you so much, Lee. I want to take another question from Manfred. Manfred?
I'm not sure if I'm online now.
Yeah, we can hear you.
Yeah.
Yes, we
right.
can. Yeah.
Isabella, wonderful to see you. Wonderful presentation. Thank you so much. Yeah. Just a question. Yeah. When we are talking about urban space and extending cities and all this thing, yeah. I would be very interested in your opinion. What you think about going? On the one hand, you can go into space, you can go into area. On the other hand, you can go into air, but you also can go downtown. What do you think about the underground space? Would be interesting to extend cities in the underground space and make them more livable. You mentioned Vienna very many times in your presentation. You know, I'm staying in Vienna. We are almost living in paradise, but it is not paradise at all. Yeah? But I would be interested in your opinion about going underground.
Yeah, thank you so much. I don't know, Isabel and Robert, who needs to go first, but it's over to both of you. You can decide.
I can go with the first question and maybe then Isa with the second one. Okay, so yeah, to clarify the differences between green growth, degrowth, and smart growth. So, well, green growth is the broader idea, let's say, than smart growth is, but they are closely connected. But green growth basically says that you can have economic growth and at the same time reduce environmental impacts, right? Smart growth is used much more often in the European Union, at least as far as I'm familiar with this term, and it's related to specializing in particular sectors of economic activity to make your city or region competitive globally or internationally at least. So, but here there's also this assumption that you can have this growth with while reducing environmental impact. So you could say, I guess, that smart growth is a kind of green growth, okay? And degrowth then is opposing this assumption of both green growth and smart growth, which is the assumption, which is that you can have economic growth continuously while reducing environmental impacts sufficiently fast and sufficiently strongly, right? So this is what I was showing about the sufficient absolute decoupling. So Degrowth says, no, you cannot just use green growth as a strategy to reduce environmental impacts back to safe and socially just levels. Okay, so Degrowth is criticizing the concept of green growth here, and it says, yes, we need efficiency, we need new, we need more efficient economies, etc. But it's not going to be sufficient to resolve the planetary crisis. And now I pass to Isa as for the second question.
Yes, thank you, and thank you, Manfred, for asking. And my answer about underground spaces is definitely negative. Whatever we do, we typically create a stronger and more powerful environmental impact. We understand very little about what soil is and what will happen very soon to the soil as a source of our nutrition source, right? And I would say I would be very, very, very cautious to try to use this space just for our humans' use. You may probably read this book, which I took from my shelf, which tells you a story of food production and what soil is and how little we understand about this. And thinking about the future, I will be thinking about sufficiency rather on ground than going any further, and definitely not underground. I'm super, super scared by the companies that are trying to get the minerals and metals, especially minerals, from the bottom of the oceans. These are our buffers. No. Without this, we can't survive. So my point is why we would need to do this, how many energy we should use to build cities underground, how much materials and of what sort of materials we would need to live there, and what sort of energy we should have to keep life going underground, right? So I'm not a big fan of that.
Isa.
Yeah.
I'm not sure if my micro is on now. This was not my point. I'm not talking about the Atlantic Ocean to be explored. I'm talking about tunnels and underground space in cities, in city space, to avoid to expand into the nature, to expand into the territory, and just say we have 4 or 5 underground levels. Yeah? They are more earthquake safe, they are more humiliated. This is what I'm talking about. I was not talking about exploring the oceans. I was not talking about, is where you know me.
Yeah, okay. Yeah, sure. But still my response would be negative.
I'm not the monster that says let's explore the underground spaces 11,000 meters down space. No, what I was talking about is how about and not only thinking about storage and about parking in the underground, but in Singapore there's already an existing science center living underground with solar panels bringing in the sunlight and reducing the space that is needed in the upward world. So there's just another dimension that I want to mention. And there's a wonderful book by Antonio Granado and Han Admiral, both ISOCARP members, that illustrate the options for underground space. Of course, you are right that companies are interested in exploring that, because digging is more expensive than building. So, of course, there are commercial interests. Yes, okay, I know all that. Yes. But we can reduce use of surface space by going 1 or 2 grounds underground. This was it was not my intention to say stick to the Arctic or Pacific Ocean. This was not my intention. Sorry.
Yeah. No, I think Isabella, she got that clarity. I don't know whether she want to react. I'm just a bit worried about time now. If we can move to the next phase, is that okay? Do we still have any burning questions? Or do you want to respond to Manfred very quickly? You will need to be very
quickly.
brief.
Yeah, I just say, well, if we are talking about two floors, and I think that was also part of my answer. Yes, what we have already, that's fine, but we should be very careful with this, because again, how much energy this requires, right? We are not used to live underground, so always it is the environment which requires much more energy than living on the ground, right? So that's the point.
Okay.
Isa, it will be a wonderful discussion with you. How many times people fled into underground when they were escaping warriors from other cultures? But this is something that we will discuss with each other. It is not the future model. Okay.
Could be, unfortunately.
Yeah. Okay, I see Rolf's hand is up. Can you just try to summarize your question?
Thank you, Hope. Well, I just came back from Hong Kong, where we had this YPP workshop with Antonia precisely on underground development. And the main topic in Hong Kong was the not in my backyard infrastructure. So the infrastructure that is not necessarily built on the street or on the ground, that is perhaps more suitable for living or for residential use. So any building that does not need windows, so to speak. And in that case, it always depends. So the first day we were discussing about costs and about the cost-benefit ratio. And I invite you to follow this, let's say, path of discussion. We will have another Young Professionals Think Big program workshop next year in Nanjing in April. And I invite you to follow us for continuing developing this discussion.
Sorry, Rolf, Manfred, can you just mute, please? If you can mute yourself. Thank you. Sorry.
No, I'm finished, Hope. I just wanted to mention that the discussion will continue because some cities cannot continue growing up. I mean, the density is also a negative issue. So we can maybe explore making quality space available for public use, public space, moving part of the infrastructure into the ground, like streets, like we do, the underground, the metro system, tunnels, etc. But expanding to other uses like energy storage, etc., technical infrastructure.
Thank you so much. I don't know whether Tiana, you want to ask this. I want to I want to provoke you to come and just ask that question verbally, if that is okay with you. I know your camera
yes,
is not working. I know your camera is not working. Yeah.
Thank you, Hope. Can you hear me well?
Yes, please.
Yes, thank you, Alejandro, also for addressing my previous question when I was asking about the relation between smart growth and degrowth. But the way smart growth is defined in countries of North America is a little bit different than what you explained with the European concept of it. It is more related to combating urban sprawl through urban growth management and growth boundaries. So, which also touches upon a lot of the policies that Isa mentioned. So in that regard, I was just thinking, because we have very similar things that in both concepts that align very well. And the experience that we have, for example, with cities like Portland, Oregon, is if smart growth policies are not implemented on a more metropolitan level, then we have something like the spillover effect, because we have these green belts and boundaries set in place in order to, contain growth in a more physical sense. But if people still move out into further areas and then just commute longer times, and you don't really get that effect that you initially planned on. So in that sense, I was referring more to smart growth. So my second question was more related to, whether degrowth, in your opinion, and this is a question for all speakers, is something that can realistically be more, is it a better chance of it being realized on a regional scale level than on a city level?
Yeah, if I can start, maybe Isa will continue. I think that both are needed. And in fact, you also need the national and international levels. So it's a huge challenge, of course, to coordinate many of the policies that Degrowth is proposing. And many of them will need to be cooperated by international agreements as well. So not just city level and regional, but if we are looking at our jobs, right, city planners or regional planners, then I think we need both. And I would absolutely agree that if you just implement degrowth policies in one city, then you will have those spillover effects. So it's really challenging, but you need a multi-level policy package, which is more or less simultaneous, right?
Yes, thank you, Robert. That's exactly the challenge. Thank you.
I would perhaps only add one thing, that even saying implementing the growth is something that it's still in the old mindset, because it's like imposing this. Either you have this feeling for the great transformation, or you don't, right? So it's like a different cultural perspective. So I agree. We will be forced to implement some policies that align with the growth, but the growth itself, it's rather the state of mind, that the coherent policy. I very much like the metaphor which is used by Daniel Schmachtenberger, who says that we actually can only break or bend, right? And the growth is a policy of bend, because the challenge we are facing requires a huge change anyway. And the question is what itinerary we will choose, right? So in fact, the growth is a smooth policy comparing to breaking, right?
Yeah. I wanted to ask Dorota to come, but there's this question that it's been in my head, and this was prompted by Robert, your answer to Lee's question. I think it was Lee or Tian's question about what is the difference between all those terminologies. I think 3 terminology she gave to you. But then I'm wondering, in real life, is it possible to actually balance economic growth and nature, like you're saying? Is it possible, based on your definition, that actually degrowth is saying bring all that together and we'll make it work? Is it possible? Is it a reality? Is it a myth or reality?
Oh yeah, the original question of our meeting today. Yeah, I think it's reality, and I agree with Isa that we are going to face. It's a kind of. I very often use the metaphor of addiction, right? That we are right now still, the environmental crisis. We can already see them, but it's not like they are. I mean, for many people, they are fundamentally changing their lives, but for many people in the global north, the life kind of still goes on. But and we kind of compare the concept of degrowth to the current situation, right? So we kind of suppose that life will go on more or less like it is now, and then we compare this to what degrowth is saying, and we think, well, is very radical. Maybe it's a challenge. Why should we do this? But then we shouldn't compare degrowth to the current situation. We should compare it to what happens if we continue growing and we just transgress all of those planetary boundaries. And we are addicted in many ways as societies, as cities, as regions to economic growth, because, for example, job creation is in the current system tied to economic growth. If you don't have economic growth right now, then people lose jobs, and it's a real, they really suffer. So when you ask if it's real or it's a myth, I think it's very hard reality, and much of it might be painful and difficult, and kind of like when we are trying to escape an addiction, it is very challenging. It is difficult, but in the end, we are doing this, for our own benefit, for our well-being. So I would say it's both. It is. I understand that some people might think it's a myth, it's a kind of blurry concept, something, somewhere over there in the conceptual space, but it's really hard reality, I would say. But I still believe that we can adjust and we can, be proactive, just like as if we were trying to regain our health, our autonomy in our health. That's my idea.
Yes. If I can complement this, it's like normally I'm a gloomy person and Robert is an optimist. It's going to be the opposite. And my point here is the following: what is money? Money is a myth, right? They do not exist in reality. It's just a belief that they do something. And by the way, it would be very funny for you to dig out who is creating money, right? 95% or something, commercial banks, but nonetheless. So we are living in the myth, right? We are living literally in the myth. We are not referring to reality, how much ore we need, how much minerals we need. That's reality, right? So when somebody is asking the question, is degrowth reality? So it's the most profound reality we can actually see, right? What we have now, it's a fairy tale. It's an illusion, right? We live on a drugs, right? We definitely do. So in this sense, if you are asking whether it is possible, I typically answer it will happen anyway because the resources are running out, simply as that. And the question is whether we can do it in a somehow planned way. It's not that we have control over acidification of the oceans. I mean, we do, but we already lost it, I fear, right? Or melting the ice cap or things like this, right? So in this sense, it's like it will happen. We are facing this. And the question is whether we can do it in a just way, in a fair way, sharing what we need to do with a global community, or we will be fighting like I don't know what. I don't want to refer to any animal in this context. we will be fighting over the last glass of water left on the ground, right? So in this sense, I would say it is a reality. And my last point: very often, if somebody comes with sort of radical idea, everybody says it's not possible, right? If you tell in 16th century Europe that the kings are not going to rule their domains, they would be up. It won't happen, right? Or if you only 20 years ago would ask somebody, would people follow the ban of smoking in the restaurants? They would be, no, nobody would follow. They will collapse. There will be a disaster, right? Today, if somebody is smoking in the garden, people say, please go away because it's disturbing, right? So the radical policies, in fact, also change the attitude. So if you are asking me whether it is a myth, I would say Not actually.
You know, I'm liking this discussion because it's going exactly where we wanted to go, because we needed an answer as to, is it a myth or not? I like your assertion that it's actually, whether we like it or not, it's going to happen anyway. So what you are trying to do, you are trying to sensitize us to say, let's do it in a more planned way. And I'm seeing interesting comments here from Simon and Gavin, and they're saying that, I like this one. I have to read it before I hand over to Dorota, to say the moment we understand we cannot eat or breathe money, we can see degrowth as an urgent reality. I think that's very exciting there. Then I'm seeing from Gavin, they say degrowth by design or disaster, they are choices. So I think we are agreeing on something in this seminar. Thank you so much for both your presentation. It was very insightful. Dorota, over to you.
Yes, so now I would like to ask Dr. Madina Yunusova, a senior researcher at the University of Central Asia with 20 years of academic research experience, our general co-reporter, a long-standing member, co-reporter in last year Toronto Congress, which was also speaking about the climate responsive planning, equitable places and communities. Madina, the floor is yours.
Thank you very much, Dorota. Yeah, I really like the way you created these talks, because we started from this reflection of comparing the human body with the city as like an organism, and I always continue to say the city created by human. So we kind of we copy some of our thickness and unfortunately project it back to the city. So we do not care much about our body, and that's why we do not care much about the environment around us. But also this is related to this made-up theories, and I really like the Roberts, presentation of some of the econometric models and some of this, self-interested behavior reflected by Isabel as a capitalism that actually, or liberalism, that actually end up by each of us thinking more about ourselves rather than community, common good. And of course, we shouldn't forget about this top-down decision-making that we continue apply, and this consumerism that actually supported by this advertisement of the fashionable way of living. You should have a house, you should have so many square meters, and nobody cares about from whom it's taken. And I'm mostly studying this kind of mining towns and the remote areas from where all the extracted resources are taken, and where the great inequality and the environmental disasters happens. It's very, very interesting to see how this the public awareness in the world of large cities actually they can become blind, and they don't see from where they take. And when they talk about the social justice and inequality inside the cities, a lot of the case I show them like, come on, guys, you have to think about also other areas around you from where you take all the resources. And what is the most important, we also pollute by, this waste water treatment plants, usually located in the region, somewhere close to a small town. So we do pollute the water, but the water goes to the other areas, yeah? And so I think that when we talk about this old paradigm, of course, something that we should not forget about, it's urban resilience. So the first Alejandra looked at, showed this picture of this, big shop, and it's actually about the capacity. So when we talk about city, we should always think about the capacity of the city. And when we include the new load with any ideas and functions, we should consider if it's capable of actually withdrawal of any shocks or stress or something that can happen. And we do see that our cities are flooded, they cannot stay against any climate change. And so this is all about the survival. So I really like this final note that Hope wrote in the chat. So we have to really, even it's very ridiculous sometimes when we engage local communities and we talk with some people who don't care at the beginning about their neighbors. When we talk about the resilience and that actually all of you can lose in a second everything you have. You have a luxury house, but the weather will not select if it's flooded or earthquake. It will happen to all the residents. it does not care about the level of your wealth, and you cannot really build such a concrete or critical infrastructure to protect yourself if your house located inside the city or dense area. So we're trying kind of make this public awareness, and I think this is about also changing our profession. So I do agree with that we should not only talk about this participatory planning on, you know, kind of engaging communities, but we have to think about how we will win this war of public awareness, so that people stop thinking about consumer as a city, demanding all the time more things, even the green areas. So they think, okay, in the past we demand concrete, now we're going to demand green areas. We say, no, you don't demand anything, you go and plant your tree, and we will teach you how to renovate using the local species. You don't bring this imported tree, which is which is very aggressive to the climate conditions here currently. You do something to renovate and restore the local fauna and local trees. So I really like this idea of rethinking. So anything we have so far, we need to reuse and rethink. And I think most of your colleagues teaching, so I hope that in your teaching, you do not start from this kind of ideas of economic growth and, densifying, but you start from what people really need to be happy and live, quality life, and also resist and to strengthen the urban resilience, because we are not protected. I mean, we already experienced the COVID, and none of our cities actually put to go through this test of resilience. So we are trying to work with the small towns to help them to come up with their model. So even though we have some UN Habitat guys who are proposing some kind of these best practices, but we say, guys, do not copy paste. This town cannot be a copy of the German town or the Dutch town or any town around the world. You need to build up on your existing environment, on studying your own culture, your history. And that's actually interesting, because this brings community together and the people start to be planners. And maybe some planners will be challenging this, because, I mean, it doesn't mean that we will disappear the professionals. No, our work will become much harder, because we have to merge so many things. Before it was easy, we do understand the capacity of the earth or land, the environment, the capacity of infrastructure, but now we have to deal with the capacities, the wills and needs of the people, but they are co-builders. So they're not just demanders, and we have to say it from the beginning. And I would say, like, whenever we work with residents in these mining towns or large cities, we always say, you take responsibility of your city, and then you co-plan together with us. It's not about somebody will come and supply you with everything. And it's not about buying everything you want, because you will never buy everything. There should be some kind of shared space. And so I think everything starts from the changing behavior of residents. And by doing this, residents will impact on the changing of the environment, and they will campaign and will demand a new type of living. And this is not easy, because it would be easy if we come and say, this is, look nice design, take it over and implement. There is so much green, and it will decrease carbon footprint. But this is by prescription. It comes from our perspective, which has nothing to do with something that people really want at that area. And here I will advocate for research, but not a very kind of a deep study. But I think really what we do need to do, we have to be in conversation with residents, because large cities usually consist of many small communities. Explain them the values behind the land they use and surroundings, and engage them in this creating sense of rethinking that will bring the growth, because those are drivers, like usually, these real estate companies and everything. These people want these buildings. But when we go to the field, when we study and we ask the questions, people don't need this. Right now, we're about to start a study on energy transition in Kazakhstan, because the state announced reaching carbon neutrality by 2060. And we want to ask from people, like, how do you think it's achievable and how it will bring any social justice, not only in large cities, but also in these mining areas. And I do believe that we will have a different picture. And I think this is really important. So the people are not silent observers of everything happening. And we as the planners can show them a possibility to participate in the urban development and regeneration of the space. And actually what is really inspiring that, yes, it's not easy, but people are really joining and really understanding, and they're coming with different backgrounds, and the proposals they bring, they really make sustainable and livable places. But what is the most important? Ownership. So the residents become owners of that ideas and that planning, and they do care about it. So it's about proper maintenance. So it's not like about just giving town authority or city authority planning and implementation, but they will become responsible. And I think if we have more responsible residents, we can actually switch to this new paradigm, not oversupplying, but looking at working with the demand side and making our demand smart enough to bring some sustainability and resilience in the cities.
Yes.
Thank you very
much,
Martina. Thank you
so much.
I think ownership and really education are very, very important. And now we would like to give the voice to Li Fan for the final words.
Thank you, Dorota. I think everything has been said. I only want to thank you, all the speakers, Alejandro, Isabella, Robert, for your presentation, and thanks the audience for comments, and also thanks the moderator, Hope and Dorota. As Robert and Isabella already mentioned, it's hard, but let's be proactive. It will happen. It will happen anyway because the resources are running out. So what we do is how we plan it in a better way. Further, my final note is that I would like to draw your attention to our ISOCARP degrowth events. We are currently running a series of events focused on degrowth. This year, we just published an article, which is an interview article with one of our speakers, Alejandro, titled with Degrowth and Sustainable Urban Development in a Chinese journal called Urban Regeneration, which is also a topic related to degrowth in both Chinese and English language. And I will find a chance to share the article with you. And further, we are planning to develop a statement on degrowth and publish it. We will announce our upcoming events on LinkedIn, ISOCARP LinkedIn, also our personal LinkedIn, as well as the ISOCARP website. So please stay with us. And lastly, I want to thank the ISOCARP Secretariat and the board members, especially thanks to Hope, who has made the great efforts to make this event happen. So this all from my side. I want to thank you all, and then hope to see you next time.
Thank you.
Thank you very much.
Bye. Thank you, everyone. Bye.
Thank you.